Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at Space Cowboy Books Online. I'm your host, Jean-Paul Garnier, and tonight we are here with Eliane Boey about her latest book, Club Contango. Eliane is a writer
Thanks for
of
having me.
speculative Eliane is a writer of speculative fiction with stories in Clark's World, Galaxy Magazine, and others. She is the author of Club Contango, just out from Dark Matter Inc., and Other Minds from Dark Matter Inc. last year. Eliane lives and writes in Singapore, and she is going to share with us an excerpt from Club Contango.
Thank you very much for having me. Um, I will start at the beginning and read from chapter one. Thank you. When I think about chance and our time together on Freeport Station, I remember the birds, and I remember chance pushing me over the edge. I hadn't thought of chance much since then. I wouldn't have now if it weren't for this door, light and sound filtering through its cracks. I had stopped on my walk because my shoelaces had come undone. But it was this sound, this classic Shanghai jazz, that led me into the alley and to this door. The scent that comes in the night. No, that's not the sound. No, not that it matters. Memories press against the skin of reality, notes testing the tension. The door identifies itself as sanctuary to spacefarers. In subscript, all are welcome. A different sanctuary on a different station, but the messaging works. I feel its hooks dig into me. All are welcome. The remastered strains of Baiguang's Waiting for Your Return becomes part of me like gold dust. There is no one around to ask if they hear it too, so I must assume it's not a dream. I remember another sanctuary, a place, a point in time, a slim, beautiful, androgynous person as fluid as memory. The day the birds returned, sulking on the counter at Tanuki, on the viewing gallery of the Freeport embarkment terminal, threatening to tear us apart. I imagine stroking my kid's stickies, plump little hand for comfort, and I kiss it. This is the way I remember that day. Chance first lifts the empty glass off the coaster. Then Chance's boots are atop the bar stools. Had those boots always been at the crossroads of distress and perfection? A skip and Chance's on the counter, 5 stories above the frantic bustle of the departure hall below, where an extraordinary crush of contractors and a few remaining settlers scramble to leave the station. It's a mean drop from the gallery to the concourse. Not a sure to kill you drop, but a sure to make you not want to try. I know, because I lived it. But my eye goes to the table, to Chance's boots. The glass in Chance's hand is like a drop of water. I feel cold condensation on my hand. Rosewood. That's what the counter at Tanuki was made of. Real goddamn rosewood stripped from some spent tycoon's heirloom 19th century bed and divan set. It warms beneath Chance's palms and releases oils that were embedded deep in the heartwood. The mother of pearl inlay of peonies is still intact. I've forgotten about those. Only good things happen at Tanuki. Don't do it, I say. Tell me what I'm doing, Chance says. I tell Chance it's about having the option, even just to hold and never to use it. Chance half smiles. There's a sadness behind the expression. I can see that now. I said that, didn't I? You think I meant it? Chance had taken the small, safe life that Sticky and I had and destroyed it. I'd begged Chance to destroy it. I'd welcomed Chance with open arms like Chance was our savior, our very own sanctuary. The Commission's lockdown procedure has elevators inactive, but the thunder of combat boots draws closer anyway as they stomp instead up a long spiral staircase, another historical asset salvaged from a once wealthy family's library back on Earth and reconstructed piece by piece here on Freeport, humanity's first multinational frontier station in space. I wonder if the family used the expensive donation as a write off on their relocation tax. Try hard. I say, it isn't us that we want. I can give them what they need. Chance says, you're not going back to what you were. The boots reach the top of the stairs, all that sound for just 2 men, but we are also two, for now. I always used the stairs, even when the elevators worked, climbed them with eyes towards Tanuki so I wouldn't lose sight of Chance. Thinking about it now makes me laugh at myself, teary eyed. There's a clink of chopsticks on porcelain from within the restaurant. 2 sparklers have been hiding behind a table of stiffened dumplings since the restaurant was cleared out and the embarkment sealed off. Did I know them from somewhere? A party, most likely. At my flat, thrown by chance, where I would have squeezed past them from the galley kitchenette on my way to the only bedroom where I would check on Sticky. If they recognize me amid the experiences they're streaming behind their privacy shades, they don't make a sign. The privacy shades cover the top halves of their faces and depict early century pixel art renders of cute cartoon fox faces. Any moment now, I'll see the teacher. A red shimmer catches my eye, but it's only the mascot of the ubiquitous Red Unicorn Group, which came out of nowhere 4 years ago and now owns every third thing on Freeport. No human has stepped out from behind the avatar of the mischievous horned red satyr. But Red Unicorn's rise did mysteriously coincide with the time Hong was slowing bad debt onto alchemy, shaking it all off with me attached. To say I'm distracted is an understatement. If I had known this day was going to be our last, I would have watched more closely. Would I have seen anything different? Would I have stopped chance from pushing me? All this time and everything we've done, and I still can't own it. The satyr twirls its lonely manic dance above the departure hall, a ghastly send-off. I haven't thought of what I'd say to the teacher. In a different timeline or a different station, we might have been friends. Shoot the breeze about organized crime, diaspora friendship networks across the solar system, and the gray spaces between the two. Focus. They say the biggest setup for failure is the failure to plan for growth. What happens if you plan to fail and against all odds, logic, and history, you grow? So big that you're pressing against the walls of your former life, crushing everything in the way. Perhaps it doesn't feel like I've won because I'm about to lose the only thing I want. I say the chance. The world we left behind doesn't exist anymore. Connie, Chance winks, uses my name as only Chance can, like a lure, an admonition, a weapon. Nothing bad could ever happen at Tanuki. An announcement booms through the departure hall. The last scheduled shuttle has left. The next shuttle docks in 6 hours. A pushing crowd below erupts in a renewed surge of energy, of anger, and confusion. A loud crack is followed by muffled grunts as three people fall over each other. A child wails over the music box tinkle of a plushie chiming in an old tune, You Are My Sunshine. If anyone was holding back from pushing to the front now, they're not holding back now. No contractors ranked below L3 are leaving the station today, not until the enforcers have found and rounded up whomever the commission thinks started the fire in the dome. The blaze grows brighter. What did Chance say as the sting of the shock weapon ripped through my flesh? Burn it down. Help me, I said. I can't. One of us was never going to walk out of here. Do it or I will. Had I always known? Chance throws the glass over the edge just as the teacher reaches us, and the birds lift their wings. What does it feel like to be pushed over the edge? When I think about Chance now, standing outside this hidden door in a different alley, on a different station, a familiar song playing outside this sanctuary for the lost, I don't think about how Chance found us, but how I invited Chance in. How I thought I was lost, but really I knew nothing. I was wrong, Chance. The world we left behind still exists. We just couldn't find our way back to it. This is a story about last chances and trading the future. This is a story about losing to win. The end of chapter 1.
Thank you so much, Eliane. So the setting in Club Contango is a space colony called Freeport. Can you tell us about a little bit about the world building of Freeport and its connection to your previous books?
Okay. Club Contango occurs about 30 years after Other Minds. And yes, it is the first international space station, first international space city. The Pacific Mutual Company is the conglomerate that runs it, much like the East India Company did, with para-national powers. And so it is a nightmarish growth of the all-powerful conglomerate that is given administrative powers. The way that it links back to Signal Tracer in particular is SE3 has sort of abandoned hope of growth on Earth, and as it has begun prospecting the new frontier, which is the greater belt, of which the capital is Freeport Station. Okay, the world building of this, well, I just imagined it like any metropolis. And Freeport in particular has a retro-futuristic feel in that it reimagines a glorious past which may or may not have actually happened in its desperate hope for its third chance, in the solar system. And I hope I've done that with snatches of the jazz age, both in American cities as well as in Shanghai, to balance that culturally. And yeah, so a lot of the world building is less in the aesthetics of the city, but in how people spend their time when they're not working. So there's a lot of gaming, obviously, and there's a lot of drinking, and there are drugs as well, which are audio neural streamed drugs, because apparently organics mess up your body in space. So yeah, that's how I begin it. And music is a big part of that world building as well, because there is a return to analog music in particular. So Chance likes jazz and house music. And at the Hazy Halia, Zaki Ibrahim the loves classic rock, and this is in response to our current lean into AI and machine created. Um, uh, I was going to say creative products like music, but it's not. Okay, machine created noise, which we imagine will unfortunately have a further lean into for a few more years until people realize that it's crap, and then they go all the way back, dig up the good music from the old times, and therefore another element of that is also remakes of popular TV shows and cartoons. So Trace watches remade show that is a bit like Power Rangers but is not. So that's how I built Freeport, through the experiences that its residents have. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
the book, like your other work, has a distinctly cyberpunk feel. But in a lot of ways, our culture today has caught up with what early cyberpunk did. We almost live in that world. How do you go about keeping cyberpunk as a genre fresh feeling? Because it does feel very fresh in the books.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure that's a good thing, because we've caught up with that cyberpunk in that we've become that dystopia that we imagined we would be. So in that sense, I suppose the way I should answer that is I don't really set out to write cyberpunk. I just imagine what we are for the unrecognized high performing dystopia that we are, and just drive that 30, 40 years into the future. And so in a sense, my work isn't incredibly deep into science fiction. Like, I don't imagine a far future. I don't imagine huge leaps, huge changes. I just do a trajectory of what we already see now, and maybe that's why it's sort of disturbingly hard to keep it from being real, because a lot of what Connie faces with her image and her personality being stolen is very plausible this year, even.
Yeah, those parts of the book were particularly terrifying.
Yeah.
There's a quote in the book that particularly struck me. No one belongs on Freeport, which means everyone does. And
Hmm.
to me, that there was this is a sentence with so much meaning packed into it. I wonder if you could elaborate on this statement.
Okay. I mean, I saw Freeport as, well, firstly, yes, a new frontier, which is, a bit of a cliche already, having said it so many times. But it is a place that it's sort of the last stage of immigration in a way, because, well, all of us do not belong out in space, and we would have, in order to achieve that, done our very best to dominate nature and laid a huge footprint on Earth and in the solar system, in that sense. So everyone has that anxiety of not belonging, and of uncertainty and displacement and not knowing how long this will last. And in that way, nobody has in this society has the privilege of belonging, which is something that I really wanted to explore because well, Singapore, I come from Singapore, I live in Singapore. Singapore as a country is a very young immigrant country. So a lot of us do not belong beyond two generations. And yes, so yeah, does that answer the question? Oh, would you like I elaborate a bit further? Um, I think that would lead on to why there is a stratification of skills and of asset value, because asset value is how the settlers define their belonging in their stakeholdership. But maybe you have a question for that that I can answer properly.
Well, I just thought it was a very interesting statement because in a
Mm.
way, every human being is part of the diaspora in
Yes,
space,
yes.
particularly because of economic issues. And a lot of this book to me focused on labor issues and class discrepancy. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the wealth gap, the widening wealth gap as a means of building the world of Freeport.
Okay. Well, Freeport society is divided into well, very simply, the settlers and the contractors. And these are subdivided from L0, which is extremely, basically unskilled manual labor, all the way up to L5. And at L5, you get the CEO of Pacific Mutual that runs Freeport. So pretty much everybody is L0 or L1. I think Connie is an L1. And Freeport is run like a corporate town in a sense that the rights that we take for granted today, or maybe now we're taking them less for granted, freedom of movement and freedom to vote, are, are, um, are assigned based on net value or net asset value. So only settlers have those rights. And most importantly, only settlers have the right to remain. So it doesn't matter what their citizenship is, they have the right to remain. And the contractors are allowed in only on a skills-based visa. And this is a dynamic visa system where their skill can be obsolete anytime and they will be given notice to go. And these skills are not based on education, like you're not guaranteed that you can stay if you have a PhD in mechanical engineering, for example. So one thing which I put into the economics, the working of Freeport is that it is demand driven. So interestingly, the skills which are almost always in demand are for musicians and chefs, because Freeport is a party city these days, because it tries its best to forget where it is and what got it there. And no one else is guaranteed staying. Even the settlers, if they lose value in their net, have to leave. So yeah, that is how I divided it. Anything else? But feel free to just hop in anytime if I'm going too far off and I
No,
forget
no,
what I'm supposed to be saying.
this is your event. You talk about what you
Okay.
want to. And if the audience has any questions throughout the event, please do drop them in
Yes,
the
please.
chat. I'd like to stay with labor for a moment here.
Okay.
Can you speak a little more about there's a very company store mentality of this sort of forcing you into
Mhm.
debt and deportation as a response to that. And then to me, which was the most horrifying element of this culture, is the addictive gamification of labor.
Yes.
That was just completely scary to me in a lot of ways. I wonder if you could speak about that company store mentality and the idea of gamifying work.
Okay. Mm, all right. The company store mentality, I think you're talking about the so-called retirement program, which is, I mean, that is what it's euphemistically called, is the net program, where contractors have their income pre-deducted, and so they're always in debt, and they're allowed to buy as much as they want, which therefore takes away the control and also builds the economy of Freeport, but then just locks them into debt, and that forces them to work, or they have to leave. And nobody really wants to leave because that puts you more in debt. You have to pay for your passage, and then you can't. You have to go back to Earth to get a job to get back here, like much like many countries around the world. Um, so that was inspired by our national retirement fund, although okay, ours is not that bad yet. Um, what was the other question? It was about gamification. Yes, so gamification, I actually had this idea when I was reading a nonfiction book. I can't remember the title now, but it had gamification in the title, and it was about Uber. And I got this book because I had been taking Uber a lot more in that time when I was working a different job that paid more. Um, and the drivers were complaining that they couldn't log off. They couldn't stop their shift unless they hit certain targets. Like they could, but then they would get penalized and a setback in some way. I may be wrong because this is how they felt, and that's how they told it to me. But what I understood was that there were a lot of disincentives for the drivers to log off their shifts. And there were also a lot of gamified goals, like they would try to log off and take their lunch break, and there'll be a pop-up that says, "Are you sure you want to quit now? Because surge is about to start in X time," or something, and so it tells them, it makes them hooked on their work. And of course, Uber is just beginning of it. People can log off Uber, and they can get on with their lives. That's just beginning of it. So, but I was trying to imagine what that would be like. And then and then of course we all have been addicted at some point to TikTok and the silly dances on it. So that was where I thought of not Trace, Viz doing the dance at the port. So anyway, to go back to the point, yes, gamification was terrifying because it taps into your fear. So it doesn't just rely on your greed anymore. Because right now, um, our incentive to work harder than we need to survive is dependent on greed, because you want a bigger house, you want to upgrade your iPhone. But in gamification, you fear that you're going to lose out because the employees are pit against each other. There's a ranking board, and this borrows a bit as well from these popular elimination re reality TV shows that I've been watching because I don't have the time to watch TV. But yes, that is in that way. Work takes all these primal fears, and it takes what they used to enjoy, because they used to enjoy dancing, and turns it against them. And the saddest irony is that at the end of that work, they still don't know how else to blow steam than by taking similar drugs and going for similar dances as well. And so their whole life is a loop of this losing yourself and just trying to race ahead and not look around to realize that you're going nowhere. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, the depersonalization of that
Mm,
environment where the employees don't know who each other are because they're pitted against each other in the
yes.
gamification is truly dystopic and horrifying. And
Yeah.
I hope that's not a prescient vision of the future. Yikes.
Yes, I hope I'm not writing nonfiction. I hope not.
Um, so the entire book takes place in Freeport, and while we never see Earth in the book, it's sometimes referenced that it's faced cataclysmic climate disaster. Um, can you talk a little bit about the off the page setting as a way of showing us how this future plays out?
Oh, you mean how Earth has become in this point in time? Well, in this point in time, climate change has made Earth quite difficult. Not quite uninhabitable, because I don't I don't want to play with the idea of uninhabitable, because I think that, not because it won't be, but because people are just so dog-headedly stubborn and are going to try to force it to be habitable, even if it's going to cause an even bigger footprint and cause further damage down the years. And that's why Earth at that time would have heated up quite a lot more, and we might have lost or be in the process of losing some coastal cities and coastal nations even. And as a result, the people who are left on Earth are either very low skilled, so therefore they can't get their visa to go to Freeport and the other nations, the other space stations, or they are very wealthy and they're therefore able to spend whatever it takes to beat climate, to live in a bubble against what's happening outside. So that's where, but there is always a longing on Freeport and on similar stations. There are similar stations that I hope to develop in further books. But there's always a longing on Freeport for an Earth that was, and of course it wasn't the Earth that they lost of 20 years ago, but the Earth of 100 years ago, where we never heard of the Great Depression, and we never heard of climate change, and we thought we could do better. We thought the party would never end. So Freeport has that love and loss for Earth in that sense, as well as in the clinging on to music and food and old TV shows. So in that sense, it's a very much an Earth city because it's not quite moved beyond its cultural roots. That,
And it's my understanding, at least from talking to another friend there, that Singapore has been hit by climate change and at higher risk than a lot of places. So is this a more immediate concern and why we see this sort of world building in your books?
well, yeah, probably yes. It's very hot here, and the monsoon rains are pretty unpredictable. But I think we are still considerably lucky we've not had the huge, massive floods of that other nations have recently had. But yeah, this is not just a Singaporean problem. Although yes, we are a coastal nation, and we are indeed at a very high risk of sinking. Although we're not supposed to say that, but yeah, this is a sort of national international concern, right? And yeah, so that's why it is sad that Freeport is supposed to be the billionaires building their third chance out in space and dragging us along to provide the labor, on their terms. And one part, so since I wanted to talk about labor, one part that I had a lot of fun writing was the pre-launch period of Freeport, when that first shuttle of people arrived, and there was in fact an almost um, an almost egalitarian society because it was barely being built and everyone lived in the same housing, and Freeport could have been that model human society that they intellectually thought it would be. They would rebuild Earth with its best cultural elements, with no poverty, with everyone employed. But of course, the fine line is that, yeah, we don't allow people in if they can't get a job, so everyone is employed, and no poverty because we kicked them off Freeport. But yeah, and they took that last chance and ruined it by stratifying society the moment they could, the moment there was enough built environment to push the contractors into the far side of the dome. Yeah.
The ultimate gentrification in a way. Um,
Yes.
so last time I interviewed you when your last book
Mm,
came out, something that came up during this interview came up then as well, which is this sense of nostalgia and
yeah.
sort of bringing back the elements of our culture that we loved, that were more lighthearted than the future that we seem headed for, or the characters in your books
Hmm.
experience. Um, when you reach for nostalgia, I notice you pull from multiple eras. And is this just a matter of your personal taste, or are you choosing these different eras for specific reasons?
Okay, yeah, I'm wondering, I'm trying to think of examples. Okay. Um, I think I know what you mean because like for instance, when Trace watches Forever Rangers, which is obviously Power Rangers, that is from our childhood. Yes, it's still playing, so I can say it's from our childhood. We're not that old. But so that the 80s and the 90s, that references a an optimism of economic growth. And I believe that that was not just in Asia for the, the rise of the Asian tigers. There was also in America in the 90s. And but that has a lot in common with the music, the jazz music, the Shanghainese jazz. So I've already mentioned two songs, basic Baiguang songs, and that's from the 1920s. Although I believe they were resung for a very long time. But basically, there's jazz music from the 1920s and 1930s, and that's pre-Great Depression as well. So that's also an economic boom in the discovery of the stock market and a realization of overnight futures being made before they were lost. So both of those eras have that naive, happy, simple optimism, and as well as financial freedom, newfound financial freedom in common. So although they are different eras, they have that in common. And that is the spirit of Freeport. The spirit of Freeport is trying very much to forget the disaster they left behind and trying to see this as the third chance or the last chance. So hopefully not to speak.
I hadn't thought about the connection between those eras, but that makes
Oh,
perfect sense and adds a wonderful layer to the book.
okay. As well as my personal taste, but
I'm an 80s kid, so I feel you. Um,
yeah.
so in the book and on Freeport, underground economies are all over the place, partly
Hmm.
as a result of needing to blow off steam, but partly as a result of the oppressive nature of Freeport's economic system. And many of these focus around vice, as you said, drinking, clubbing, gambling, and so
Hmm.
forth. What made you decide to write about this milieu on Freeport versus the more economically privileged?
Oh, well, I suppose it's just a lot more interesting because yes, so the okay, I mean, well, how do I answer that? It starts with the visa system, right? Okay, first settlers you can get your settler right to remain in Freeport just on basis of either having a very high level job, like you're the CEO of an incredibly essential company, or you have a huge personal net worth. But for everyone else, you can only get on if you can only get onto Freeport if you fit the dynamically weighed skills requirement. And practical as that is, it's defined by skills that are known to a certain bureaucracy. And we all know how in tune bureaucracies are with what we really need. So bureaucracy is not going to put out a requirement for people selling tacos or or soybean milk or making cables for your personal devices. And this is how uh, all of that sort of develops underground through real need not being met by a formal economy that puts in a hard, very visible hand. So it's not the invisible hand, it's a very visible hand in designing the economy. There is a word for that, which I suddenly forgot. It is a planned economy in a way. It is a planned economy and then allowed capitalistic free growth within there. So that is an interesting dichotomy that I should probably write more of another time. Um, so yes, so all these underground businesses developed out of real need that is not anticipated and met, as well as the cost of living in Freeport. Connie lived before she. I will not give away too many things. Connie lived in a really tiny space that was barely enough for her and Sticky, and this was already the plushest space possible for someone of her skills rank. So it's really hard to make a living in Freeport, and Connie has she has Club Contango, she has one official job, and she has two other side hustles. So everyone who's not a settler on Freeport has to have some side hustle of sort, or has to be big on the game tables to make it. And the settlers are represented by Zeta and Raw, and to a certain extent by Hong's ex-wife Bettina. And well, I guess they're just less fun to write about, although they give a bit of jazz, a bit of what's the word? Yeah, a bit of that bright young things of Evelyn Bow and such. But the heart of it is contractors like Connie who are struggling just to survive.
So you touched briefly in your answer there about the amount of space available. And
Okay.
the book has a sort of claustrophobic feel due to the oppression of the denizens of Freeport.
Mhm.
Um, was this intentional? And if so, how did you achieve this effect of confinement and lack of space through text?
It was it intentional? Yeah, I mean, it was intentional in the way that I described her. Okay, there is an emphasis or a use of landscaping. I mean, with trees as quite a luxurious asset to have. So rich areas have trees, and basically poor areas do not. And that's also part of the reason why Connie leaves Sticky at her very good preschool, her very illustrious preschool that goes all the way to primary school, quite so much because she has a play area with trees. And space is also seen, like for instance, in how Connie on her own is always just reheating shelf stable sludge and dry pellets for herself. But settlers go to Tanuki, which is pretty much like any other gorgeous restaurant bar that we can go to now and take for granted. And there's also the arcade, which at some point she's taken shopping at, and that is it's almost a theme park of what a high-end shopping mall is like now, but that's a luxury in the future because it fills a lot of space and you're able to touch things and you don't just order them off a catalog and you get fresh food. So yeah, fresh food, by the way, is another luxury. It's another way that I have used to create that class difference. But other than that, I'm not sure that I did too much claustrophobia intentionally. Yeah. But if I achieve that without knowing, I'm very happy.
The book has a very distinct sense of space, which made me want
Okay.
to talk about that. Um, you also mentioned earlier in the interview about this sort of digital drugs, these audio neural drugs, which
Yes.
is a very interesting thematically. You have delight, and there's some others. Can you talk a little bit more about these mind altering? I don't know if substance is the right word, but these mind altering devices.
Okay. Well, they are very much part of Freeport culture because they are almost encouraged as a way to release and I mean, to not be too on the nose. I mean, it is the literal dance, music, and drugs are the literal opiate of this future masses. And therefore, they are encouraged to take them so that they don't look at their net balance and don't look at how in debt they are, and they keep going. So these drugs are very accessible, and I didn't really go too deeply into what the experience is like. But in the first chapter, there is a mention of how the two sparklers are streaming experiences, and these are actually sort of third-party experiences. Like, for instance, if you want to experience what it's like to be, I don't know, a person living in a forest, and that person living in a forest would upload a memory of their own, and you would be able to stream that and feel that, and that is how you escape. And that is actually a step forward from Lion City, because Lion City, for those who have not read, of which I'm sure there are many who have not read Signal Tracer, Lion City is a nostalgic escape into the 1990s where things were good apparently, or so we like to imagine, good and innocent. And so a step forward from that is to stream someone else's experiences, someone else's memories, so that you can experience what it's like to be another person. Yeah.
Yeah, were the 90s good? That's a good question.
Uh,
Um,
I think we had our rose tinted glasses, but but compared to today, I don't know.
truly. Yeah, that could be a whole nother conversation.
Mm,
Um, the Club Contango also is quite a bit about motherhood, and
yes.
motherhood specifically in a state of economic oppression,
Mhm.
where there are great challenges for motherhood. But Sticky, the child, like most children, comes off as largely unaware of the darkness of the situation. And I wonder
Mhm.
if you could speak a little bit about your various characters having drastically different perceptions of their world based on their status and their age.
Okay. Um, well, Sticky to begin with, yes. Sticky is unaware of what's going on, and that is in fact Connie's pride because she wants to shield her kid from it. I think Connie probably feels that she has been forced through a lot of things that she didn't want to feel, and forced to be certain things by her parents as well. And so she tries her best to shield Sticky from it. Sticky's only 6, by the way. So each time that she's feeling like she can't do it anymore, that's when they go and have chocolate, or they go and go to the cat cafe and spend more money than they can possibly have. And so that to her is her doing her best to be the good mom that she can only be, because that's the one thing that's entirely on her, you know. Um, but yes, aside from that, I did put some effort into showing sides of Freeport that are completely different for different people. So Zeta and Raw and Bettina's experience of the very lush and decadent side of Freeport. Like Bettina goes to experience parlors, which are decorated in like opium dens, like very orientalist, fanciful, flamboyant opium dens. And she spends her time there basically, getting wasted. and and that's some and Zeta and Raw spend their time at gorgeous, gorgeous bars, or watching period plays. And Connie feels that Leo, I mean, she's not immune to that siren call, which is why she runs Club Contango as well. She likes that adrenaline, and she likes associating with these people, and thinking of them, thinking of her as a friend, and almost feeling part of it. It keeps her going, and this is later it is a thing that is a thorn between her and her former best friend, who is Visala. And Visala judges her for wanting that indulgence, and for always looking up, for always looking at the gold and looking at Tanuki and wanting to be rich and wanting to be just not poor and not just getting by. And she basically calls her out for being delulu, right? But that's what it takes, Connie thinks, to keep the bad days away. Yeah.
And so this one, I'm not quite sure how to talk about this without
Mm-hmm.
spoil. I'm trying to avoid any spoilers and stuff. But Connie often sees birds, and birds are used as a metaphor throughout the book, although
Mm-hmm.
somewhat vaguely. And I wonder if you could
Okay.
speak about the imagery of birds without giving too much away about the how the story unfolds.
Okay. I think, well, the birds are already in the first chapter. I don't think I'm giving anything away, but the Connie suffers from depression, and it is a content warning in this book. And with a very typical sort of self-effacing millennial way, she meets that with very dark humor, and trying to act like everything's a joke, because if everything's a joke, it can't be that bad, right? Although it is that bad. So I've avoided using the word depression in that book, stylistically. I mean, and that's where the birds came in. It is a very important thing to me, and is important. I hope that I have addressed it well, while also keeping true to Connie's spirit of trying to just laugh through the pain and live life at the lemonade factory, so to speak. So the birds her depression. It's the weight of everything that's on her. And what happens with them is something else. We'll see. But yeah, and where they go. Yeah.
I also found that interesting because that certainly
Mm.
comes across, but in a way, a bird can also be seen as sort of a symbol of freedom or, taking flight.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that was quite rich that it has a feeling of mixed message.
Yes. So when you read the whole book and you go back to the first chapter will make sense. And that's all I'm going to say on that. Yeah.
Um, Also, something that comes up in the book, and here's another one where I don't
Mm.
want to get into spoiler territory, but you take the idea of something that's very real in our culture today, identity theft, and you take that to
Hmm.
an extreme. But it's not just
Terrifying.
it's not just in Connie's situation. It's also in how particularly the sparklers, wear digital masks with this sort of avatars and how we hide behind false identities. And I
Hmm.
wonder if you could talk a little bit about the idea of identity throughout this book, and what that means to Connie.
Okay. Well, Connie never fully owns what she is. And she is her own harshest critic while not actually doing anything about it. um, like she's fully aware that she's a loser and she's let people down and she had decent opportunities. She didn't make much of it. And she fell for various scams and schemes and she never quite recovered from them. But she still doesn't quite do anything about it for quite a while, and she just accepts her lot, although she tries her best to work with what she has. And so in that sense, identity for her is something that she wants to shed. She wants to be a better version of herself, but she doesn't know how. And yes, well, that's the premise for the book without giving anything else away. The sparklers, the bit about the sparklers was actually a bit for fun, really. But now that you mention it, yes, it is also an interesting thread on identity in that for the sparklers, they don't feel a threat. So it's quite interesting. It's like whenever you hear of a new law being released or a new product that, some billionaire is developing that will go into your brain, and yeah, it can help people who have certain, needs for it, to make connections. But it can be used for so much worse. And how you see the potential and the risk of every new technology and every new law shows where you stand in wealth and class lines, actually. And so for the sparklers, identity is just something to play around with, and they don't even care that their their pixel masks are so unique that it's kind of obvious who they are. um, which is why Connie remembers certain people by their masks. So it's sort of, yeah, it's ironic in that way, and that shows how out of touch the sparklers are with the reality that the contractors live.
There are so many other things I want to ask about, but they'd give spoilers and rich characters like Chance. But I'm gonna leave it to the audience and readers to find out for themselves because I don't want to blow anything in the book. It would be too easy to give away. But I want to say I'm very happy that there's still Pocky in the future. That was
Yes.
one thing that made me pleased about this dystopia. So, lastly, what are you currently working on? What's coming up next for you? I know you have some other events lined up, and what's happening in your writing world?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I have one event with Mysterious Galaxy with Samit Basu on Friday, and oh, sorry, I mean on Thursday, and it's Friday in the future here. And then I probably have a thing or two in January that I have to get people to actually nail down to. Um, so not that many in that sense. But I'm trying to keep busy writing because this is the time of the year that sort of slows down for me work-wise and other things. So this is therefore the time that I try to write as much as I can. So I am polishing up an urban fantasy that I think is a mess. but we shall see. I think it's a mess. It's the first time I'm writing something like that, so it's quite interesting to me. And I've also got another cyberpunk novella that no one asked for, and I don't know what to do with, but I quite like it because it looks at cyber what am I going to say? It looks at cryptocurrencies, and then there's a bit of a heist in there as well. So I like it, but I have no idea where it's going to go, and I hope people see it tongue in cheek and not as me being a tech bro. This is tongue in cheek. This is meant to be fun against them. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
Wonderful. You don't come off like a
Mm.
tech pro, by the way, especially not in your work. Um,
Okay.
Eliane, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you for another wonderful book, Club Contango. There's a link in the chat for anyone watching on YouTube. You can find that down below the video in the info.
Thank you.
Thank you to our audience for being here, and I look forward to reading more of your work and seeing you again.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for being here.